everyone, and my name's Emma. Today we're going to talk about zero waste. When it comes to choices and decisions, the ones that we make with more intention will help us create a world that we want to live in. Now, zero waste is a term that has been popularized by somebody named Lauren Singer. She went on a TED Talk 4 years ago or so now, and she held up this jar. And this jar supposedly had 4 years worth or 2 years worth of trash in the jar. And since then, many people have tried to be on the zero waste journey too. And Bea Johnson is another person who has made this zero waste trend very trendy. But I really want to talk about the issues with the zero waste movement, the issues with the name, the issues with what it portrays, and just overall the issues that we might find in sustainability that need to be overcome and need to be dealt with upright if we want to see this movement progress in the direction that we hope that it does. Zero waste claims that a person creates zero waste, and there is just a few issues with that. It's inauthentic. As humans, we will always create physical waste, and it's usually treated by a wastewater treatment plant. And that alone makes that term inaccurate. But what it also does is it really sheds no insight into what a person is actually doing. It really changes the focus from trying to take changes and in any space that you can to be more aware of the impact of your decision to being a perfectionist standpoint. And when people say zero waste, oftentimes people who claim that they're zero waste will often say, I'm not actually zero waste. And then it creates this inauthentic understanding of, well, what is this person even trying to tell me? They're not zero waste. They're saying they're zero waste. Zero waste supposedly means you can never use plastic ever again, but everything I buy comes in plastic. And then you go down this rabbit hole, and then people throw up their hands and they're like, why would I do this anyway? I can't be perfect. Everyone's going to judge me. And it goes down a rabbit hole that isn't helpful to anyone who claims to be zero waste, anybody who lives on the planet, because any choices that we can make to step into a place where we are more aware of the impact of those choices is really important and valuable. And zero waste often demonizes the use of any plastic and will oftentimes really reduce the amount of food that people can get access to. And zero waste is inaccessible in various ways when it does come to food. If you have access to bulk bins, oftentimes it's called a zero waste switch, where you bring in your own bags or jars and you fill those up, so now you're producing no waste. But most of the time, these bulk bins are made of plastic, and they're dumped into these plastic bins out of plastic bags, usually bigger ones that aren't often sold unless they're at restaurant supply chain stores, and even then, it still comes in plastic. And for every pound of plastic that we produce, there is 7 pounds of plastic up the supply chain. And that brings me to the most important point about zero waste, is that it was never meant for individuals to use. Zero waste was intended for people within the corporations to use zero waste to reduce waste within their supply chains and to hopefully get to circular waste, where everything that is being used is also being used throughout the process or reused somewhere else, and that it becomes cradle to cradle instead of cradle to graveyard, or just a landfill where there is a linear path and not a circular path. A linear path where you use a product and then it gets thrown out, and then where it gets thrown out isn't really dealt with. It doesn't really matter what happens to it. And that's how usually production and manufacturing works. There is a linear process. The raw resources get used, and then the waste gets dumped somewhere in a landfill. And zero waste is an issue when individuals begin to embody that term and shed light on it being an individual's problem to be zero waste, to use as little plastic as they can, and if they're using any plastic, it's terrible. And now a lot of time, the people who are zero waste are not using this rhetoric. The people who are using this rhetoric is the people who don't want to have anything to do with sustainability, and it pulls the people who are unsure of really which direction that they want to go in. They want to make good choices. They don't really know how their choices impact, and it pulls the people who are in the silent majority, who would really go either way, to the side that thinks, well, if I do nothing, it's better, because if I don't do it perfectly, it's not worth it. And when we shift the light off of corporations needing to be zero waste to people needing to be zero waste, it removes the responsibility to the consumer. And though the consumer has a lot of power, especially with the choices that we make and the dollars that we decide to spend, very important, absolutely, but corporations are a big part of that. And if we're not talking about how zero waste needs to be embodied by corporations, by manufacturing, we are doing ourselves a disservice by embodying that term for individuals, which is what recycling was created to do, to put the responsibility of consumers to recycle the plastic so that corporations can continue to make them. So that sounds contradictory. Well, zero waste people are trying to use less plastic, and recycling isn't good either, so what do? You take the steps that you can in the areas that you can make them. If it comes to food, which is an essential item that we all need, and it comes in plastic, buy the food that you need that comes in plastic. There's many areas in our lives where we can reduce plastic consumption, and yes, even in buying food. But if there is a type of food that we want, that we think is enjoyable, beneficial to us and to our health, we shouldn't feel like we should be ashamed of getting it because it comes wrapped in plastic. It's not our fault that the society we live in creates plastic into pretty much everything that you can buy. But what you can do there is to decide to buy the things that you need the most and that you enjoy the most, and that you're not just constantly buying things that you end up throwing away anyway. And it becomes being more aware of what you are buying. If you go and you just buy a bunch of vegetables and you put them in all this reusable packaging, and then at the end of the week you end up throwing most of them out because you really just wanted to eat pasta and you really didn't make that many vegetables, that's also not the point. It's not to just eat fruits and vegetables. If you're not eating them and they get thrown out at the end, that's creating waste. And there's so many types of waste that we do create in our lives that we shouldn't be focusing just in one area, but we should be trying in as many ways that we can. Whether it's reducing the amount of clothes that you buy because you realize, I actually like the same 3 outfits and I want to wear them, and not feeling burdened by the idea that you always have to wear a brand new thing in society, and just wearing what you want. Or if it's you want to go out to eat, you go out to eat, and maybe you choose to get a smaller portion so that you can eat all of the food at that time and not have to take it out in a carry-out, as now many places won't allow you to bring your own anyway. And bringing your own stuff and utensils when you can is great, and we should do it, but we don't have to import brand new items into our life as well. A lot of people will buy the zero waste starter kits, and it's very much the opposite of the point. Whatever you have in your house right now is the best thing to use. That's the most sustainable thing to use. You already have it, you already use it. Keep using it until you can't anymore. And that is the most sustainable option. Sustainable means, how long can we sustain this action? It's simply that. And most of the time, sustaining an action requires thinking about, how long can I use this? And understanding that if I've been using it and I can still use it, that I should be doing that. And there's different ways that we can go less waste, where you're using maybe shampoo bars, but you first want to use up all the stuff that you have because you don't want to throw it out. And these are things that are much more important to be talked about than claiming that you're zero waste. There's the idea of all of this is to reduce consumption in the areas that we can. If it's food, if it's places that you can not do it, it's okay. And I think that that's often forgotten about, that as much as we want to live in the best ways that we can, it's okay when we cannot. and we can always try to create this change in our lives wherever we can. And if you can make it in other places, then do that. But it has to be this step-by-step process, and it doesn't have to be this thing that consumes your entire life. A lot of people that were claiming to be zero waste said it took up their entire lives because they were like, I can't eat anything that comes in plastic. And if you live anywhere, that probably reduces your access to food significantly. And there's definitely better types of packaging that are better, but there's a lot of greenwashing within those as well. So if you're getting something that's biodegradable or compostable, what does that mean? Oftentimes when something is compostable on packaging, it's not suitable for home composting. So actually you have to throw it out. So there is a lot of things that are just misunderstood, misconstrued, because of how it's being branded, because of how it's being marketed. And that's intentional. It keeps people confused, and it keeps people fighting between each other, saying, oh, you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that. And what we should be doing is encouraging each and every one of us to take the steps that we can. And that's really the whole point. The zero waste movement is great for, on paper, what it's wanting to do, but it also, to an extent, glamorizes something that a lot of people in the world have been demonized for and have been shamed for doing. The reusing reusable items in certain aspects where poor people have had to do that because they haven't had access to any other option, those people are often shamed for that, whereas people who are zero waste or considered extremely sustainable are glamorized for it and said, oh wow, look, they're so helpful to the environment, they're so amazing, where people have felt shame for doing those exact things because they were not of the same economic level. And there's a lot of greenwashing and whitewashing when we use certain terms. And if you've used zero waste, if you've heard of it and you are against it, the thing is, none of us are perfect. We all do what we can with the information that we know. And as more information is coming out about saying, let's not use the term zero waste, let's use something else, because the way we attract people into the movement, the way we make people aware about what's going on is the most important thing. When we can create as many conversations that have a continuation in the right direction into a positive change, that's the most important thing. And if that requires changing how we frame things, how we talk about things, I think it's really important. I think it's really valuable to take that into consideration and to stop using terms that are inauthentic. If we want people to be more authentic to being a person and being a person that wants to connect to the world that they live in and figure out their place in it, we should be using terms that are authentic and can be helpful, instead of dividing people and forcing people to believe it's one or the other. Because it's not one thing that got us here, and it's not one thing that is going to get us out of here. Climate change was created by a variety of things coming into this perfect storm, and it is not one thing that is going to get us out. It is not going to be just individual action, it's not going to be just corporate action, it's not just going to be government law or government collaboration. It's going to be all of these together, but more so understanding that we're all on the same team, that we are all trying to create a world where it is accessible and accepting, and that people have access to the resources that they need to live a life that is free and independent, and that they can become the person that they have always needed to be. And that is why we need to be careful of the words that we use and the choices that we decide to make. By understanding those consequences, we can create a better understanding of ourselves, the world, and our place in it. And that is something that we can all become more aware of, something that I become more aware of every single day, and something that I hope that you will join me on this journey with, to understanding who you are and who you are to the world. Hope you got something out of today's video. I hope to see you soon. But until then, I hope that you have an amazing day.